Okay, so I think we should start. Welcome to the day after discussion for the SCCA members. My name is Ruslan Yusufov. I am the managing partner of MINDSMITH, a tech think tank. Today I have here with me 3 experts on anti-crisis management. They will share their vision about the future, and together we will try to find out what is required to be resilient and sustainable as a person and as an organization. All the experts are from different countries and have very different background. However, they all work with people and are experienced in business education. So please let me introduce the speakers. Victoria Mikhailova is a co-founder and director of Sensemakers, master trainer on process communication model and emotional assertiveness, leadership coach, academic director of program at Moscow School of Management SKOLKOVO, lecturer at several business schools around the globe, and Chancellor for Foreign Trade of France. Dr. Eyal Ronen, a co-founder of Sensemakers, strategy, leadership, and communication expert, organizational psychologist, founder and president of Entrepreneurs Organization in Israel. And Philippe Sandt, founder of Impactive, a company that brings to clients tailor-made solutions for their growth, top executive in global organizations from France. So we live in a technology-driven society. Many challenges of our time are tech challenges. The way we meet today, actually not in person, but through a live stream, is an evidence how rapidly the world can change within a few months. But in addition to technology-driven challenges, there are many other disruptions. Pandemic brings up health and safety concerns, the way we communicate, the way we work, the way we entertain disrupts global society. Digital generations have their own vision and own view on consuming, and many core human values are changing. So the challenges are various: the financial crisis, the cybersecurity issues, ecology, and many others. I will read you a few recent news. Just as of several days, Uber fired 14% of their staff. That's 3,700 people. Lyft fired almost 1,000 employees. TripAdvisor fired 20% of their staff. That's approximately 900 people. Yelp fired 1,000 employees. Airbnb fired 25% of their staff, almost 1,900 people. So we live in the turbulent times, and everything is changing very rapidly. So today, let's see what we have as tools and methodologies to survive the turbulent times. And I would like to start with Philippe. So Philippe, seems like chaos is the new normal. What's your view on the current situation? Philippe, please turn on the mic. Nope, still no. Yeah,
sorry about that. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Ruslan, for this nice introduction. I was very flattered to be asked to give my opinion because, as you know, there are as many people to give opinions as there are people on this planet today about what's coming our way and what's coming our way so rapidly. And my perspective is the perspective of somebody who has been running businesses for many years before becoming a consultant a few years ago. So I relate, if you want, to what it must be like when you're in a company. And I was thinking on what does it mean to be facing those issues you're describing, and the metaphor that came to mind, and for what it's worth, is a change of environment, which I was very simplistically called moving from driving to sailing. And I don't know whether, can you see my screen? You can, okay. And the way I would say that is, you knew how to drive. Well, now it's time to learn to sail and learn it fast. Why? Because there is a fundamental difference, in my view, between the situation as we used to know it, and when I say we used to know, I mean just a couple of even weeks ago, and what it's become now. And let me take 3 minutes to explain that to you. I think we were in the business of sort of truck driving wherever we sat in the economic world. And what I mean by truck driving is a smooth ride, meaning the road is barely bumpy. Well, there are bumps, obviously, but they are manageable. But it's a soft ride. You are in an environment where if you want to go from A to B, well, you go directly from A to B, and where the obstacles are manageable. I mean, you know, you will have maybe a traffic jam, maybe you can have a flat tire, although it's very rare now. You know, the engine's now extremely reliable, so you're not going to be breaking your engine on the way. Well, it could be a traffic jam, yes. There could be a toll to pay here. Or there could be a Teamster strikes in the US, but nothing that cannot be overcome. In other words, we used to be in a world of reasonable predictability. What's different if you move from those solid trucks to those fancy, fast boats, sailing boats on foils now, which are flying. A boat is flying today. This mere way to say things says a lot, I say. Well, if you sail in high seas, what does it mean? It means that bumps on the roads are the norm. If there are winds, they change all the time, strengths, directions. You have waves, you have currents. So you are, by definition, on an uncertain, changing by the minute, or should I say by the split-second environment. Second, if you want to go against the wind, well, you cannot go in a straight line like you would do with a truck. You have to find your way towards your goal by what they call tacking. Okay, so you cannot go directly to the wind. And your team, that's a very important notion, is in danger. Those guys who are on those type of boats, they wear helmets. And that's more than symbolic, because if your boat is capsizing, you can kill people. And that has happened, by the way, in competitive sailing recently. So we're moving from a certain degree of predictability to brutal uncertainty. That's how I would certainly see that. And my plea to you is try to portray yourself having dramatically changed and not seeing a continuum between the previous situation and what it is now.
Well, you know, Philip, I don't know how to sail. I tried it once, so I've been a truck driver for all my life. So that's very nice to hear that I have to get a new profession now, but nobody seems to be teaching me about this profession, and nobody seems to be giving me a helmet. So I found myself as a truck driver in a sea that is full of waves, that is dangerous. So what should I do, and what should all of us do as persons? Do you have any specific instruments, like I would say top 3 recommendations we should all follow?
When I thought about this morning we're spending together, obviously dug into what I see with my current clients, what's my experience of management, and try to root my thinking into real life. So I don't pretend to have a magic recipe on how to teach you sailing for dummies in a matter of 20 minutes. However, I'll tell you how I approach this, or I would approach this as for consideration by our audience. I call it the resilience pyramid. you always need a pyramid for anything. Your brand, your whatever, have a pyramid, and you're on your way. And joke apart, this resilience pyramid, which tells you that our fundamental needs have changed, and you have to start with the basic. Is the first one, I call it, although it's not particularly optimistic, you could say, is survive. If you, Ruslan, you don't know about sailing, but sailing is something which, when you're at sea, from everything goes fine to you're really, really in a survival mode, it can happen in a split second. And I think that's exactly what's happening to us, and the brutality of what you described to us about layoffs in some firms and what's coming our way, which will be no different, say that. So let me give you 3 elements for your considerations. I would not dare to call them tips or advice, elements for consideration. The first element is your own physical well-being is certainly affected by what's happening to us. Whether you are fired or not fired, whether you're confined at home, whether you're sick, whether somebody in your family is sick, I mean, the degree of nervousness is something very important. We recently organized a webinar with a very famous specialist of sleep. Okay, he founded a company called the European Sleep Center and has been studying our sleep habits and how to better treat them for close to 30 years now. He's been working with astronauts, been working with pilots, been working with Formula One drivers, been working with sailors. And not sure you knew, but over the last few decades, with a fantastic acceleration over the last 20 years, we collectively have lost 1 hour, 30 minutes of sleep. 1 hour, 30 minutes, whereas the human being had not lost much over the years before. So it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that it has an influence on our physical and nervous resistance. So sleep, for instance, is also known, and that has been demonstrated over and over again, as linked to diseases. Okay, there is a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease or higher incidence of obesity with people whose sleep is not good or is not sufficient. So survival means there is nothing wrong. It's even a tip, an advice I would give. Think about your own physical health, something that we might have overlooked when we were driving trucks. Here we can't overlook it. We need to focus on that. So in survival, that's the one that would give you as an advice. Another one would be give more focus to your families. Well, if you are confined with your wife and children, you have to, because a lot of effort has to be put behind surviving together, meaning not fighting, having a regular routine, finding enough breathing space so that we can stand each other. But as you know, when you're in a survival mode from a business standpoint, either because you got fired or either because you're a consultant and money is not coming in, either whatever, family can be put at the end of your priorities. And in survival, working on your family environment, to me, is paramount. And the third one in survival that I would throw, and there could be many others, is your teams. Wherever you sit professionally, whether you're a big manager, whether you're an employee, whether you're a mid-manager, whether you're a worker, wherever you sit, your teams are as much affected as you are or worse. And that's something which I would think we should put in our survival toolkit. And let me give you just a number of this, which is a French number. The burnout, which you could call a disease because it's now well described. Burnout is something that touches 7% of the French active population on a regular year, okay? So that's 1.9 million people who get through a burnout phase within a year in a country like France, which has 65 million inhabitants. So we're talking about something very meaty. As you can appreciate, burnout curve will probably take a bump, and we already see that over the last few months, meaning a couple of months. And the populations which are at risk are well identified. First, it's women. And women, why? Because this traditional way of carrying the burden of professional duties and more family duties sometimes than men takes its toll. People who are highly connected, people who are perfectionists. The perfectionists are really, really, really hurt by the current situation because they think that they cannot do their job as well as they used to do it before. And even the young population. And we see a boom of burnout or people who are saying, I feel I'm on the verge of burnout. As a former manager, I can tell you by experience, and I'm not particularly proud of that. You're always only one night away from a burnout of somebody on your team. You'll be the last to figure it. It will hit the most motivated people in your environment. And one day you come to the office and this person who has delivered like a maniac the night before is not here. He or she doesn't care anymore. He moves to a true survival mode. And what you're left with is obviously business issues, but you're left with your shame. Okay, so survival, think of yourself, take this example of sleep, care for your families, and make an extra effort to have empathy with your team. And team doesn't only mean people who report to you. I mean, people that could be anywhere in your business environment.
Okay, so sounds like not only you have the boat in the sea full of waves, but it is also full of burnt out sailors that are not motivated anymore. So you have have to not only to sail and to lead, but also you have to somehow deal with daily and hourly concerns of your team and probably some other boats that are in the sea at the same time. So, Philippe, I know you have been leading many multinational businesses in Europe, starting from Nike and Colgate and many others. And you obviously have passed through many crises before in 2008, for example. So do you think this situation we have today is somehow comparable to what we had before? Are those crises of the same nature? Can we use the same instruments to overcome the current circumstances? Or is it a different situation?
From what I observe, as a human being who's been in business and for 35 years, and who's coming from the consumer goods industry. That's where where I come from as a businessman. So as you said, I work for Nike, I work for Colgate for many years, I work for Business. I've been counseling companies in the consumer goods industry. The big change is a change in consumption overnight. We have a client, partnering on the client, is producing cheese. He's selling cheese. He has very famous brands of the world, and they have enough capacity to produce all the cheese that consumers like you and I, maybe my connection is bad. Or why is it that suddenly to bite? So what I'm saying is what is specific to that. Not only are little bits, I mean, locked at home, something I've never seen before, but on top of that, people's consumption go down the Maslow pyramid, another pyramid, because what is just very basic needs come. It's a fantasy because there was no real out of stock or of any material nature. But people have suddenly been feeling that they cannot feed their children and themselves. And when it comes to toilet paper, even things. That's what I'm saying. I have never people
Philippe,
locked at home and
Philippe,
storing food.
I'm sorry. I think the connection is a little bit slow, so we are losing a little bit of you. So if I understand correctly, people start consuming less, and this is the core characteristic of the today's situation. So as they are consuming less.
Sorry, but connection was really bad because what I was saying is people are consuming more in a very unexpected fashion. I mean, suddenly they buy cheese and toilet paper like they've never done before, as if there was an atomic crisis coming our way. So that's something which I've never seen before. So this is very different in nature. When people start to go to their, as I said, first layer of the Maslow pyramid, to go for things which are necessary for their survival in the proper sense of it, that's unheard of, at least that I have witnessed, because I was not born when it was Second World War, but those are war behaviors.
Okay, I would like to remind all our all the people who are watching us that we have a chat on YouTube. So please feel free to give us a few questions, either to the panel of speakers or to the specific speaker. And I have another question for you, Philippe. Do you think there are some geographical differences? So you're from France, and obviously you know the situation in France very well. What is common and what is different in different countries? So maybe some observations about France, some specific issues that are related to the current situation.
To be honest, considering what my scope of business today and considering the fact that we're talking about a period which is like 6 or 8 weeks max, and what I know is what I read in the papers, I would not be able to give you a good answer to that question, which is how is it different from other countries? What I can tell you, if Ruslan, you allow me, is give you 1 or 2 examples about the 2 other layers of my pyramid, which are very specific to France and maybe can be helpful to other people who are listening to us. And 1 or 2 of them, which I think are really of, I would say, broader appeal than what is happening here. But I would not be able to spot really what's different from what is happening in Russia, for sake of argument, or in other parts of the world, where I assume some problems are much worse than what we experience here. Let me go through that maybe 2 other things, because I don't want to take too much time from our audience and from my friends here. Second thing I would suggest is, after you have managed to survive, rethink a little bit a few things that you thought were a given. Very simply, the first one is know yourself better. I've run businesses, as I said. I've worked in a very operational and managerial positions for 30 years. And if I had one thing I would do if I were to rewind my career, is first try to know myself better. The Greeks call it gnotiseoton, and they thought it was the fundamental cornerstone of wisdom. Know yourself first. And if this is a work you have never or not enough done on you, I suggest you do it. What makes you tick? What are you good at, not good at? What are the things which are unsolved in your life? Because if you don't have that lucidity, things will be difficult. Second, pay attention, obviously, to your relationship with others, how you communicate to others. What is the profile? What are they? How are they interacting, working? What are their expectations? What are they in demand of? And same, if I bring here a personal modest testimony, that's something I think which I have never spent enough time doing, and I would encourage our viewers or listeners to do that. And the third thing, rethink your role. If you're a chartered accountant, very often you don't see yourself as a leader, but every one of us can be and should think of him or herself as a leader. A leader is not a manager. A leader, the thought leader, is a behavior leader. You're not a leader of the people who report to you, especially if you have nobody to report to you. So a leader is somebody who will be infusing optimisms, bringing solutions, calling shots, raise issues. So think of yourself as having a broader influence of what can be done in the new environment. You can all bring a very, very important stone to this new thing we're trying to build on those turbulent times, in those turbulent times.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything on the top of pyramid, or is it
Redesign?
Okay.
And I'll be very short on this one because it's anybody's case, but I'm not saying that everything that was wrong before, that everything was wrong before and suddenly everything should be done by magic. During the sort of what we call the events, what happened in May 68 in France, the famous turbulences, and they were big turbulences in Paris, and as you remember, everywhere in the world, the women sleep, they were burning their bras, and burning bras is not a solution to women's freedom. So I'm not saying that we should throw the baby with the bathwater, but there are a certain number of things which might be done, because that disruption is a formidable chance, a formidable permission to dare to do things we never dared to do before. And if I am an accountant, or if I am in the finance business, for a company, for instance, there are things you could reconsider. Let me, obviously, you know that cash has become even more important than before. You know that, for instance, a budget, the sacrosanct budget process that sometimes in big companies takes 2.5 months and is wrong, obviously, at the end of January 1st, because all things have not coming in exactly as they were planned. All those things, obviously, they have to be probably fine-tuned, redefined, changed. But let me just give you one example, a more precise example. When you are in business, very often, when you want to invest, or when you want to merge, or when you want to acquire a company, when you are doing simulations, business plans, and you have a most likely case, a worst case, and a best case. Best case and worst case are here just to make your most likely look better and sellable to your management, your bank, you name it. God damn, a worst case, we know it now, is something can happen. So if you do that, please do real worst case. And don't forget that worse, which is what we're going through today, can be worse than your worst nightmares. So if you have a worst case, just to take a very concrete example of something that can be part of the life of some of our listeners maybe, make a true worst case and think about the measure you should take if push comes to shove, meaning if this worst situation materializes. Okay, so everybody will obviously think of what it means to redesign for himself. So survive first, rethink yourself and the relationship to others and see yourself as a true leader. And third, you have the permission to dare to redesign things that you have been doing on an automatic pilot, because they probably need damn good adjustments to fit the new reality of our bumpy waves.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip. So I have a recommendation for the audience. So right now you should just go and make 10 push-ups to stay fit and survive. And then you should probably write a question in our chat. And in the meanwhile, I would like to ask Eyal about the person of the future. So this sailor who has been a truck driver, and he found himself or herself in the sea that is dangerous, and probably he or she has prepared for the worst case scenario. But the skills this person has are from the past, and the mindset is from the past. So do you think we need to tune up our mindsets, or what beliefs shouldn't work in the current and the upcoming situation?
So after Philippe has taken us through the world of sailing, truck driving, bra burning, I'll take us through a little journey that actually Philippe called for. He said, if he were to do one thing differently, he would think back and crystallize his own understanding of himself. Let me tell you a story. So yesterday, I was meeting with the CEO of a really prominent cyber company in Israel. And we were talking about the effect of COVID-19 on their business and on the world. And he said to me, Eyal, look, this Corona thing, it's done already. So I said, what do you mean? He said, everybody is talking about the new normal. I don't believe that there is a new normal. I actually think that this thing will go away really soon, and we're all going back to the old normal. Nothing is going to fundamentally change in the world. So that is interesting. But what is even more interesting is that yesterday afternoon, I was speaking with a different business person, a person who has sold 4 different companies, who shared with me yesterday that during these times, he made 50x on his stock investment. So he knows a thing or two about how to predict what is happening in the world, at least in a financial way. And he said something very different. He said, I think the Corona is deeply changing everything that is happening in this world. The way we connect with people, the way we do business with one another, the way we focus on investments, everything is changing. So then I found myself scratching my head saying, of these 2 deeply analytical, very smart people who hypothetically have access to the same data, so they can research, they can find all the data themselves, they've reached 2 deeply different decisions or conclusions. Which one of them is correct? Who is right? Unfortunately, for our viewers, I don't know who is right, but here's what I do know. I do know that the way you view the world makes a difference in how you draw conclusions. So if this is your brain, okay, and this is a question for everyone, how do you today see the world? Do you see it the same way you did before? So you look at data, you draw conclusions, you make plans, or maybe something different is happening in your brain. Maybe you're viewing it more creatively with a different approach, asking new questions, maybe even finding some excitement. I'll tell you something strange. I've been speaking with really a lot of people these days, and I'm finding that a lot of people are having their heads down saying, this is horrible. We've never seen such a terrible situation. Our business is down 95%. This is the end of the world. And then I see quite a sizable number of people who tell me, Eyal, this is the best period I've ever had in my life. So what is the difference? Is it because they're in different industries? Maybe. But I argue that it's something deeper than that. It's their mindset. It is how they approach life, how they collect data, what data they pay attention to, and how they draw their own conclusions. This is the culmination, the combination of how we view the world, our thoughts, our beliefs. And it's also a matter of active choice. So we can choose what we pay attention to. So at Sensemakers, for instance, one could have said, look, so you're in the executive education business. Nobody is paying for executive education right now. And in fact, we're seeing something very different than that. We're seeing a lot of people who now have time and desire for their own self-development because they want to make a bigger impact for themselves and for their companies. So we could have frozen, but we chose a different path. And one more thing that I want to mention about mindset. And there's something that is called a self-confirmation bias. So self-confirmation bias is this tendency that we all normally have to look for only things in the world that support the hypotheses that we already have. So if I believe that the world is collapsing, I will only notice all the data, all the news articles that really show me how the world is collapsing. But if I believe that Corona is almost gone, I will only pay attention to those research studies that are showing me that things are getting better and that businesses are starting to move forward. But here's a different story. What happens if the world is changing, but you're not? So business is changing, the way you need to connect with people is changing, but you are not changing. What happens if you still do the same thing again and again and again? Well, then you're probably drawing some negative outcomes for yourself in your life. Because if the world is changing and you keep approaching it with old tools, then you're using something that is no longer relevant. And in the next few minutes, if it's okay, Ruslan, I would like to share a few practical ideas for things that people can do for their own self-improvement so they can right now, today, before the end of this conversation, approach things differently and ask different questions to get better results. So if the world is changing, and let's say you're now in a new business environment, or you're now stuck, at home with your spouse, 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, 5 kids, 13 kids. You need to do work because still there's work to be done, and you're pulled in a million different directions. So that is a new situation. But you yourself, you move from one situation to another. So the way you approach things will make a big difference. I argue that you must evolve. And a really smart person has once told me, if you want to get better answers, ask better questions. So if the question is, so what do I do once my business closes down? That's one question to ask. Another question is, what opportunities do I have in today's environment? Another example, so at home, one question to ask is, oh my God, how do I survive this day with 4 kids climbing on top of my head? And the reason I'm using the number 4 for the number of kids is that's because what I have at home. So the question is, how do I survive this day? Or another question to ask is, how do I make this day a memorable day for my family and for myself? Hopefully memorable in a good way. So the question you ask will dictate the answers you get from yourself.
One of the best. If I may interrupt you for a second.
Please.
Well, it sounds like a good practice, not only in the crisis times, but just for your everyday life, right? You should ask yourself these kind of questions when everything is okay, to be more memorable in a good way for your kids.
Absolutely. It's definitely not just for crisis. And I'll be open with you. I'll share that when I feel myself in a bad situation, I have bad days. And when I find that I'm in a bad day, I will always go back and I say, wait, what questions have I been asking myself today? And I find that time and time again, if I change the question, I can make a better day for myself right there on the spot. So it's something that can really quickly shift your mentality, shift your attitude, and then shift what you do, shift your behaviors, and then shift your outcomes. And I'll take this to an even more practical level, if that's okay. And Ruslan, please feel free to keep jumping in with questions. That's great.
Yeah, I have the only question. What the guy you had an example about with 13 kids should do different from the person with 4 kids?
Abstinence is the answer to that. But someone recently, I read an article saying that we are expecting a baby boom in 9 months, but only of those whose this is going to be their first child. So this is an interesting thing to see. And if others have questions on the YouTube chat, please feel free to ask questions as well. So I'll take this to a tool level, if that's okay. So self-coaching is the practice that everyone can do to get a better outcome for themselves every day. What is the challenge? One of the biggest challenges that we have is that we rarely finish a thought. And to me, that's one of the biggest roles of coaching, to have someone who helps us finish a thought. But sometimes we can't work with a coach, or we want to do something on a regular basis. So what can we do ourselves to finish a thought? So one thing that very often helps is writing down and taking some space to write down. But what do you write down? And there are a lot of different techniques. Today, I want to talk about maybe the #1 tool that I know that helps people produce different outcomes in times of crisis, but also in everyday life again. And I'll share this example with you. So I've been working with a client. He's a top CEO of one of the largest financial institutions in Israel. And he very proudly told me, Eyal, in my to-do list, I now have 263 open tasks. I said, wow, you're really important, right? You're really busy. And he said, yes, but this is driving myself nuts. I said, okay. And how effective do you feel? He said, Eyal, I feel very ineffective. I feel like I'm the slave of my own to-do list. I said, would you like to change that? I said, absolutely. So I gave him this one tool that I'm giving you today, and he reported that 3 weeks later, his work life has completely changed. So here's the tool. It's one question that I recommend you ask towards the end of every work week. So depending on when your work week ends, maybe on Friday afternoon, sit down and ask the following question. And the wording is really important, so write it down for yourself. What are the 5 most important things that I will drive to completion next week? What are the 5 most important things that I will drive to completion next week? Now, how is this different from a to-do list? Well, it's different because of a few keywords. First of all, I'm building prioritization right into the question. Most important. By the way, why 5? I'll be honest, I don't care. It can be 3, it can be 6, but it needs to be a manageable small number. I have found that 5 is a good number that people can count on one hand. So that's why 5. But what is very important is that you have to ask yourself, wait, are these the 5 most important things for me to complete this week? Second item is drive to completion. It does not mean that I need to do it myself. Maybe someone else on my team will have to execute, but I need to drive this to completion this week. So you prioritize, you find the 5 most important things, and then you focus on driving them to completion. Before the week ends, you need to make sure that you check in with your 5 drive, with this list of 5 most important things that you want to drive to completion. Check in with it and make sure that you're making progress. So this is one self-coaching tool that can really quickly change how you prioritize. And in times of crisis, maybe the question of what is most important shifts. So Philippe was talking about survival, but he was also talking about redesign. And for a lot of the businesses that we work with, we're seeing that redesign is now the most important. They're already there. So they have layers of survival. They've laid off people, they've cut salaries, they've renegotiated things, but they're now focusing on growth on the day after. Let me give you another coaching tool, self-coaching tool, if that's okay. So another self-coaching tool is something that I call the daily drill. The daily drill is different. So the 5 drive is something that you can do for a full week. But the daily drill is something that I recommend that you do every morning. Maybe not the very first thing you do in the morning. You get to choose your own priorities, but close to the beginning of the day. The daily drill is a set of 2 questions that you are to ask yourself and write down. The first question is very surprising. How do I want to feel today? How do I want to feel today? Do I want to feel happy? Do I want to feel successful? Do I want to feel productive? Do I want to feel connected? Do I want to feel curious? How do I want to feel today? And then people tell me, Eyal, but feeling is something that happens to me. What do you mean? How do I want to feel today? And I say, no. A feeling is something that you can have control over. You can do things in your life that will then impact how you feel. And here's the proof, the second question. So once you've outlined how you want to feel that day, ask the second question. What 2 actions will I take today to feel that way? So if I want to feel successful, what 2 actions will I take today? Please, not what results will I achieve, but what actions. So what 2 phone calls will I make? Or what 2 conversations will I have? What 2 websites will I visit? What 2 emails will I send? What actions will I take that will help me feel the way I want to feel today?
Eyal,
Yes.
if I may interrupt you for a second, Philippe has been talking about the burnouts in teams. Can you use these techniques to help your peers, your team, your spouse? So let's say, can I ask my wife, how do you want to feel today? And the second question would be, what actions should I take? Or what actions should you take? So how these techniques work in assisting others?
So my partner, Victoria, will talk in a bit about leadership and how to take some of the tools and the approaches into teams. But I'm happy to talk about working with spouses. So one of the things that you need to be very careful of is what happens when you look someone in the eye and you say, my dear, how do you want to feel today? In many situations, especially in stressed situations, this will be interpreted as maybe arrogant, or it could be interpreted as arrogant, as what do you mean, how do I want to feel today? I feel something authentically. So if you want to ask that question, you can, maybe it would be wise to first share that you were at this live broadcast today and they gave you this tool and you want to experiment using it together. So I think the framing of this is very important. I think that will save you from a future divorce. By the way, framing is very, very important in many ways. So, but it can absolutely work with others. Make sure that you tell them why you're asking this, because otherwise it can seem weird. And weird is, in these situations, not necessarily a good thing. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, please continue.
Okay. Let me mention just a couple more things really quickly, and then I want to say that when you evolve, okay, so when you ask better questions, it never happens in a vacuum. And what you just said, Ruslan, is an example of that, right? So if I'm asking myself better questions, what happens with my family members? I will share this with you. So the daily drill, I love doing it with my kids. I love it because I find that a lot of people are afraid of speaking about feelings with their kids. But I also find that kids are really great at speaking about it when you allow them and when they also see you are speaking about your own feelings. So this is a great example of how you can use that in other environments. And it's this entire evolution that I'm talking about, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So you're not alone. And, you know, often people say that the group of people that you surround yourself is really important. I've even heard claims that say that you become the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And that goes for financially, for body type, so workout, for nutrition, for mindset, for business growth. You become the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. I don't think anyone has really tested that scientifically, but the approach makes sense. So during these times, I want to encourage all of you to think, who do you spend the most time with? And spending time, obviously, if you're in quarantine, you are spending time with your family or with others who live in your household. But this is not the end of it. You can surround yourself with others, even virtually, in Zoom meetings, in groups, in associations like this meeting. And this is really important. I'll share an example with you. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was on a call with a client of ours, a large software company that works globally. And I was leading their customer advisory board. And we had on the call about 15 or 20 people from all over the world. And even in our panel today, right, we have people who are now in Tel Aviv, in Moscow, and in Paris. And we are all in different places in the crisis management at the country level. And if I ask Victoria or Ruslan or Philippe, so what is your country doing today? Or what is your business doing today? And if they're maybe 2 weeks ahead of where I am, I can learn from that a lot. I can learn about planning. Or, for example, Israel, which is where I am right now. Last week, it unquarantined people, so we no longer have lockdown. Maybe if we speak about how to prepare for business reopening with people in countries that are now reopening businesses, maybe there's something that we can learn from that. So I think that specifically in this crisis, there's a tremendous opportunity that lies in surrounding yourself with people who are global from different places in the world. And one structure to do that is in something that is called a mastermind. A mastermind is a methodology that has been around since the 1930s of the previous century. And I'm not going to go, we don't have time to go into the details, but it's an approach that is super effective we talked about asking questions. So asking them in a group setting so you can learn from one another and get 9 or 10 different perspectives that can get you unstuck instantaneously. But the basic foundation that I want to share with everyone here is surround yourself with the people that you want to learn from. And in this crisis specifically, maybe not just with people from your immediate environment. Look for people globally, because that will make a big difference. And we see global leaders are doing that today. And I will stop here so we have an opportunity to chat further.
Yeah, I know, Eyal, you are producing or organizing masterminds at Sensemakers. How do you usually compose them? Are they should they be composed of totally different people, or like a group of businessmen sharing opinions, or should it be a musician, a businessman, a consultant, a person from oil and gas, to have a broader view? What is your approach at Sensemakers?
So I actually have a very strong opinion because I've run masterminds in different scenarios. And a lot of people tell me we want to be in a group with people who understand our industry, who share the same knowledge and same data. But I find very consistently that the biggest breakthroughs come from input from people who are not in your industry, who've gone through very different life experiences, who view your business or your personal life very differently than you. So I strongly recommend, and it doesn't matter if you join a Sensemakers mastermind or if you create your own, it really doesn't matter, but create a group of people who are as different as possible. I would recommend that you share maybe similar core values. So the values of curiosity or sharing openly, agreeing on confidentiality in the group. I think these are all really important concepts. But the content or the background of the people, as diverse as possible, that will produce better results.
Okay, so we have quite a few chartered accountants here, so probably they should organize a mastermind which consists not only from financial people, but other people, right? If I understand correctly.
So there's a tremendous
other industries.
Sorry, yeah, there's a tremendous value in spending time with people in your profession, and hence the value of professional associations. There's a lot of value in that. But when you're looking to break out of your existing patterns, when you're looking to create not a linear growth, but jump in your growth, then you probably want to look outside of your own industry. You want to look at how people are doing things in other areas. So that would be my strong recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I have another question about Sensemakers, because you told about organizing together people with the same values. Can you maybe describe the values you have in your global network?
So I'll describe a couple because I think they're unique. So maybe the one that jumps out as the most unique is the value of sense of humor. We believe that when we approach things, sense of humor is very important. Why? Because we now know scientifically that sense of humor opens creativity. People who allow themselves to be in a space of humor, they make better decisions and they draw better conclusions. But also, it's a lot more fun, and we like fun. Other values are around generosity. So we believe in sharing openly with our colleagues, with our partners. We also believe in freedom. So people are, they need to choose their own destiny, and we support that. And I think these are some of the core values, and I'm not going to go into the depth of all of them. But they're unique because they're not just values. We see them as the core operating principles. This is how we make decisions. This is how we hire people into the network. This is how we decide on what program we develop next, because we want to make sure that this is reflected in everything we do every day.
By the way, which program are you developing next?
So right now we're launching a program that is called The Day After, a program that really helps people transform the way they approach the world, themselves, business, their existing business or other opportunities. And as I said before, we believe in a global approach, and that's what we're bringing to the table. So global experts from all over the world that are helping businesses prepare for the day after. And Victoria will talk about not just the day after, but more than that.
Okay, so let's move on to Victoria. Thank you very much, Eyal. I keep looking at the chat, and I don't see many questions out there. So I would ask once again to write a few. So Victoria, we've been talking about teams and avoiding burnouts, and probably the principles around leadership are changing. How would you recommend the leaders who want to be the leaders of the future, not the leaders from the past, to work with their teams? And what practical techniques would you recommend in avoiding burnouts in different teams and projects?
Thank you, Ruslan, and I'm very glad to be here today and to share with you some thoughts and some ideas. I was very interested by the presentation of Philippe and by what Eyal said, and probably I will start with the idea that I was thinking when Philippe was explaining the pyramid of survival, rethinking, and redesigning, that even before, if there is a before this crisis, I was meeting people. Let me be a little bit more provocative than my friends, who I would qualify as being in a confusion between what they are doing and what they need to do. And I think it's exactly the same situation that we are going through right now, where to put the accent on which part of our life: survival, rethinking, and redesigning. And even before the crisis, I think a lot of organizations we're living in the survival mode and not on the mode of the creation and design. And now, as well as the decision that you will take or you are taking today for yourself, for your team, and for your organization, what are you doing? When? Are you just on the survival mode, or you are at the same time rethinking and redesigning? Will definitely impact what will happen for yourself and for your organization. I will share my screen. Let me do that. And I will put this presentation. So today I would like to share with you a little bit of my ideas about the organizational health span, because as we are speaking about the survival, we're speaking about the life of the organizations and about the life itself. And we are still in the very Darwinistic perspective of when Philippe, you've been saying about how to say this, the survival. So what survival is, and Darwin said that this is how we adapt to the environment which is brutally changing. And also the second idea is that it's not just about the adaptation, but it's also about the collaboration, because as the species we're quite weak. And comparing with the tiger, with lion, if I go to the jungle and I meet a lion, so probably my chances to survive when I'm alone and not with the appropriate arm will be quite very small. So as people, and we speak about the organization, we are speaking about the collaboration, how we'll put together the resources and to take ourselves from the place where we are and where maybe we think that we are, because it's a little bit different situation for the people who are facing the crisis, like no business, no resources, cash is burning very quickly, and the people who think that they are in this situation, but they are not, and also the certain activity sectors which are benefiting from the crisis because they have an incredible acceleration of the activities, and speaking about some IT organizations and also retail, which is in this situation where they have to provide, of course, with a kind of difficult situation, the resources. So I would like to share the ideas about how we're switching from the world of Descartes to the world of Edgar Morin, and why I chosen this picture. A couple of days ago, I will also start with this story. I was running a discussion with a guest. Every Friday, we're having the discussion that we call the kitchen philosophy, and the idea that we are inviting the very bright people to talk very quietly about the philosophy of life, like we are doing in the kitchen, and we take some ingredients and we try to cook a new dish with all the ingredients, and we decided to do the funerals of Descartes. So René Descartes, you know, this is the French philosopher and the mathematician who impacted very much the way how the economy is working today, how the organizations are working today. Why? Because the basic idea of Descartes is like we are splitting the whole into the small parts of it. And when we make the addition of the small parts, we will have the sum of all of that. And today, a lot of ideas are based on that. Like, let's look at the science. The science, when you bring the different experts from the different domains of the science, very often they cannot talk to each other because they have a very deep knowledge of something. And the expertise, what we call the expertise, but they declare themselves not being expert to the something else. And then I believe that we lost quite a lot this possibility to see the organizations as the whole and not as the addition of the small parts. And the philosophy that I would like to share today, the approach to organization is the holistic. And the picture here is Edgar Morin, who is a French philosopher, promoting the idea of seeing the organizations, and I am not afraid of this term, even humanity, is like the whole body where we have to find our place and the place of our organizations. So what we are speaking today is we're speaking about the organization. Let's see how we can resist and also to go through the resilience if, for example, the organization has been really shaken, to get back to something that we call resonance, to be in a good health in a time when you are exposed to something which are calling the crisis or the chaos. Okay, so how we can keep this health during this crisis, or if we are shaken very much, how we go through the recovery and get back to what we can call the good health for the organization. So the question comes, what is the good health for the organization? And I'm sure that because we are having a lot of the chartered accountants listening to this talk, the question will come also how we measure the good health of the organization. Are there some KPIs for that? And I will give a contradictory answer. The very first part of my answer will be, do we need the KPIs for measure the good health? Or is it about the KPIs, what we are going through? And the second, of course, I believe that we can measure a lot of things. So I would like to speak about the organizational health span using the model. And we are using the diagnostic for that, which is called Organizational Health Span Diagnostic, or HD, on which we are, it's independent on the crisis or not crisis. We are focusing the attention on three main areas. And let me start with the first area, which is the structure. So basically, in every organization, you have the structure that we call the strategy, which is composed of three main points, which is what is your vision, what is your mission, and what is your plan, how you will get there. And in the time of crisis, if your organization is not having a very solid structure, and solid, it's not like rigid, but it's very, very flexible, and being very flexible, still very solid, okay? It means that is there in the vision the very good reason of why we are doing what we are doing. Probably your organization will be in the trouble much more than the organization which is having this wonderful why. So I will give the example, what is the why? Because the question is why we are doing what we are doing. For example, for our organization, Sensemakers, we have this why. We believe that there is a big injustice in the world, which is like the wisdom went away from the field of the organization, from the field of the business. We are not speaking a lot about the wisdom in the business. And the businesses very often are driven by something else. You mentioned, Ruslan, that that our society is driven by the technology. Someone else will say that our society is driven by the data. And if you have a look at the business models that are emerging now in this world, or started to emerge even before the crisis of the COVID, it's just two possibilities among the others. We have a lot of businesses and business models today which are driven by generosity, like sharing economy. We have a lot of models which are driven by the caring. It's also kind of generosity, caring about the employees, caring about the customers. And we have a lot of business models which are driven by the people connections, which is the case of all the platforms, better connection between the customers and the businesses. So I think that this is, I'm getting back to the Philippe's pyramid. The crisis is the very good time to ask yourself, is my why resistant, resilient, and resonant enough? Is it something that I want to do and I always wanted to do through all my life? This is something that resonates with the world around us. It creates the sense for the other people. So then we are having the mission and vision connected together. And mission and vision are very important even in the world where you say, oh, okay, so probably what I envisioned is not what will happen. So if this question comes up, it's okay to sit down, mastermind, other procedures, and to rethink your vision, because the strong vision is the one which is not afraid of going through the crisis. Then, if, for example, we take apart the plan is how we will achieve to this vision. So probably during the crisis, the flexibility is the word which will be the right one for defining how we will have to work with the flexibility. Philippe was speaking about the, for example, definition of the budgets. Okay, we have so many new factors in the environment for getting out of our plans. I think that we still have to have the plans, but probably to show much more flexibility on this part of your strategy. And why I started to speak about the OHD. So when we have that, or you rethink that, or even you redesign from scratch the vision, the mission, and the plan of your organization, and you actualize it every day, then the question will come on how you share with the people around you. Are you surrounded by the people who are sharing this mission, vision, and for the plan can stay as flexible as you can? And the question comes here is both the leadership and the relationship in the organization. The leadership probably will be also the very, very important issue during the crisis. Why? So because in leadership, you have the three basic functions, is to show the authority, to provide the security for the members of your team, and also to create the value around you. And leaders are people. We've seen that from the Eyal's presentation. We have all our concerns. We have families, we have kids. There are little boundaries now between the professional space and between the personal space. And I can work from my kitchen with my cat entering into my screen, and I am running the meeting with my employees. So, and I have still to provide the security to the people when myself, I don't feel the secure. This is the difficult part of that. And when I'm also like burning out because I'm working like a hell 24 hours a day, so probably less, but I experienced that situation when crisis started. So in France, I'm sitting in Paris and we are quite close to being released from the lockdown on next Monday. But at the beginning, of course, I was very anxious about the situation and about my family and by my parents who are sitting far away from here. So how to provide here with something which is, I know where we are going, and to provide the security to the value to the people. So the techniques that Eyal just given a couple of minutes ago, they are very valid. And okay, so take care about yourself, what Philippe said as well. And probably here, if you see, and this part of my presentation, the relationship will be very important, because if you are surround yourself with the people who will provide to you this support, the production, it means like focusing their attention to do what is necessary to do, to focus the attention on what is important, and also to speak about the issues, to bring things up, to talk up about the things, and also to wrap up the things, okay? To decide, do we, for example, need to get rid of some practices in our organization? Do we want to speak also about the something that is that was the problem in the past, and to get rid of that? So yesterday we have been running a coaching session, and then our coaching session was a very how to say symptomatic situation. The person said, we are running the crisis meetings very often, but on these crisis meetings, we are not speaking about all the problems we are facing. So we are going and speaking about that in the corridors. Is it something I have to do? And I said, okay, listen, so this is the moment when we have the duty to say things very clearly to each other, because when we face the issues, we can find this ability to communicate, to speak very calmly and with no unhealthy anger, but to have this healthy anger to create things together, this is what I call love. And by the way, so I would like to give the definition of love in terms in which Edgar Morin told about it. He told love is the very interesting mixture of the wisdom with the craziness, okay? And today, I think in the crisis, we are having the very interesting mixture of this wisdom. We are needed to have this wisdom to learn from our experience, but also to actualize all the knowledge we are having with the situation, and also with the, not just common sense, but the sense of the global will, of the global wealth, of the global good, and to assess the experience that we have for the new condition, for the new transition, and also to decide what really we want in the future. So the crisis.
Victoria,
yes.
I have a question. Who should initiate this talk about revising the way we behave or work in the organization? Is it the top management? Is it the owners? Or can it be done from any level of organizational structure?
Yeah, Ruslan, thank you for this question. And I will refer to what Philippe said. He said, this is the leadership function to speak about these issues. And I believe that anyone who feels the leadership, who wants to be the leader, and of course, the people who have the official role of the leaders, this is their duty today to make the proof of this love and the proof of this wisdom and the proof of this craziness to go a little bit out of the boundaries and to redesign, rethink the new organizations, even if some of the people of this organization believe that they are still in the survival mode. Because if you focus just on the survival, it will happen. You will stay in the survival mode. If you just ask another question, a different question, you will move smoothly to the redesign or rethinking mode. And when you redesign, probably you will find new ways on dealing from the crisis and benefiting from this crisis actually. So I would love to also to make a metaphor. At the beginning of the crisis, I went out to the streets and the streets were empty. And my right brain said to my left part of my brain, it's wonderful. I enjoy this crisis because I can smell the air. I can smell, it was wonderful. It is wonderful spring in Paris. We have a lot of trees, blossom, and a lot of flowers. So I can smell all these trees and flowers. And also I can hear the sound of silence, which is beautiful. And I felt lucky in this crisis because it was like I have plenty of opportunities, because the silence and the emptiness, it's also they give the space to bring something new. It gives the space for the creativity. And we have a lot of choices because we are not under the obligations to do what we've been doing for a long time ago. And some people really were not loving what they were doing. Okay, let's be lucid. Not all the businesses are creating the value for the people. So this is the right time. And I think it's a little bit like a Darwinian selection in the businesses. The meaningless businesses will die. But it's a good news because we will have space to create more meaningful businesses, and also businesses connected to each other, not competing between them. Creating a new space, I'm not, how to say, idealistic, but I really believe that if we go through this, we will get to something which is called resonance of the organizations, which creates desire. If you have a beautiful, meaningful project in your organization with a why, there is a reason here, now, and for the future to build something, and you have a beautiful team with a beautiful relationship, so automatically people are desiring to be here and to work here. And yesterday I was listening to the podcast of my friends speaking about how to fire people right now and whom to fire. And I'm seeing a lot of situations where people are willing to have a significant reduction of their salary to stay and to work in the projects because they believe in the projects and they have desire for that. And also if the leadership is showing the authority, the security, and valorizing all the initiatives, okay, there is a trust, and the trust also creates the energy, and the energy creates the outcomes. And if the leaders are focusing enough on the creating the vision, mission, and also adjusting the plans, and also staying as authentic leaders, so it creates the feeling of integrity, and the feeling of integrity is the feeling of the health. So we are building the organizations which are healthy in the moment, but which are also having a better immune system, and which are also having the higher degree of the resilience, so they can go through the, for example, it's a lot of the organization that has been damaged. I was reading the numbers of how many people are fired in the air companies. British Airways, 12,000 people out of 42,000. It's a lot, okay? So this is the trauma. This is the trauma for the company, for the people, and we have to go through this trauma now. And resilience is the process. It will take time. But I believe that if there is a leadership, if there are new projects, and there is a relationship and where the people can talk and provide enough support to each other, okay? So we can go much faster with less trauma, with less damages through this process and to build the organizations. And if we don't do that, we'll have the opportunism, the clans, the mistrust, and the resistance. The envy will be to stay somewhere else, not in the organization. So this is how the organizations which are now before having this less resistant immune system, I think that they will probably die or have the damages and go from the survival mode to rethinking, to redesigning. But the good news that a lot of things are possible. And the leadership is definitely the very important part of this process.
Sorry, there is a question about the plan. I am receiving questions in YouTube and in my personal chat. So about the plan, should it be long term or should it be short term?
Okay, so interesting thing in this plan is, as leader in this world that we call VUCA, okay, this is your decision. Do you want to be in VUCA or do you want to be in a non-VUCA world? And my proposal, if you want to get out of VUCA, accept the idea that we are living in the world of chaos and we need to work and simultaneously on the three levels of Philippe's pyramid. We need to think every day about the survival. Okay, that's clear. But at the same time, we need to think about the long term, and we need to think about the midterm and how to do that. Okay, in this VUCA world, it's very, I would say that it is very simple. Okay, if you have a very strong why of your organization, okay, it's kind of your protection of your immune system for having a long-term vision. But, you know, something which is interesting, it's a relationship to the time. Every leader has a different relationship to the time. This is something I discovered. Think about what is the term to which you will make the projection for yourself. Some leaders are living in here and now. And it's not a question of good leadership, bad leadership. We have also the brains which are working this way, okay? And some of us are very good to think it's short term. Some of us are very good to think about universal humanity rules and laws, and that's okay as well. And some of us are very good for planning for like 5 years. But the good news is like every of one, we have the ability to think long-term, short-term, mid-term. My recommendation, okay, take time to sit down and to define your vision for the long term. And also feel free to say to yourself that the time is your friend. You're not under the constraint to resolve all the issue of the humanity of the company just now. Focus on a couple of topics every week, every day, as Eyal said. Okay, so give to yourself this possibility of staying flexible and to adjust your plans. But keep in mind that when you sail, and Philippe, I think that you will not contradict me, of course you will do upon the wind, upon the waves, but also you will need to have the destination where you go to. And this leadership, the leader is the one who knows where we go. And this is the way how we will need in this crisis time to focus both on the long-term objectives and on the short-term. And the short-term, every day when you wake up, you have to reconsider the situation because the stakes are moving every day. So for those of you who are playing poker, poker is a wonderful game for be trained for this adjustment. Every time you start a game, your position will change. Your cards will be not the same. Okay, so probably you will move also in the tournament from the beginning to the end, and the competition will be a little bit like different around the table. The people who you are playing with, they are your partners, but you are competing in a way. And the competition, it's not the, how to say, the one against other, but together to be better. So every day, reconsider your plans, ask the good questions. And the first good question will be, what is the good question for today? What is the good question for now? I should answer. And this is what I call the flexibility. And the flexibility, I mean, you can still have the pivot around which your company is organized. But okay, you probably will not achieve everything as you planned, but you need to keep this direction. I was also, when I was listening to Philippe, so I had the image of myself. I have a very limited experience in sailing. But when I was participating with a couple of friends in the boat in the regatta a couple of years ago, I found that the most difficult time on the sailing was not when we faced the waves. It was very scary, but when we had no wind. And when we had no wind, it was like funny because our boat stopped, and like a couple of meters from there, the other boats, they had the wind in the sails, and they were sailing, and we've been like blocked without movement, and it was extremely frustrating. And I learned something which was a lesson to my life, how to deal with the frustration when you want to move on, but you cannot because there is no momentum, there is no wind, and there are some also forces from outside which are not there. So I think that being opportunistic in here and now is also a very good skill that you can develop for yourself and for your organization, also to accept that there are some down times when just you don't have the wind. So what you can do, use this time to redesign, to redefine, and also to survive, but together you can go further.
Thank you, Victoria. I suggest that maybe very briefly, you can describe what is inside your program you are developing right now. And then we have a few questions, actually quite a few questions. I think we can run some blitz to everybody and comment really brief on them. So just a few words about what is this program, what is inside it, and for whom is it structured?
So actually, we developed a program which is having two possibilities. We developed the transformational program, which is the program for the leaders, for the C-level executives, entrepreneurs who want to go through the whole cycle of redesigning, rethinking their businesses, but also having the very practical tools to survive here and now. It's a program of 12 days run by the international experts from different countries, and where we go from the understanding the challenges that we are facing, going through the personal change, going through the organizational redesign, and also going through the very practical MVP and the new proposal for the world, with the idea of having a new project of self and organization. And we also developed the workshops which are answering the here and now problems of the survival and the very quick adaptation, which are based on the Mastermind, what the colleagues from different countries, also from different industries, run by the experts. And we are proposing also the workshops specialized for focusing on the particular topics that people can have the basic tools for unlocking the skills in the workshops of half of day. So the objective is key learnings for to have this holistic approach, understanding their environments, and also to have the keys for personal, mental, psychological, and real health. Also how to get out of viruses of the ideas, beliefs, practices that became the problems for moving on. How also to go through the surgery to cut what is unnecessary, which is what became the problem, and also how to recover and heal your organization and yourself. So this is what we are proposing now. Ruslan, did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe some instructions for more information. Maybe you have some website or something that we can go and dig. Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yes.
Sensemakers.biz.
Yeah, sensemakers.biz, and we have also the website thedayafter.biz.
So if you want, Victoria, if you stop sharing for a second, I can show it.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So please, Eyal, please do share. And I suggest we have a blitz of questions. I have a few of them, so feel free to answer, but keep it short so we have as many opinions as possible.
Sure.
So,
let me just say, if I may, for just 1 second about this. So we've prepared a resource for people so they can take a look at what is important now in terms of preparedness for the day after, and they can find it at thedayafter.biz. So I just wanted to mention that as we answer the questions.
Okay. So the first question is about the day after. When the day after is going to come? And I think the last part of the question is more important. And how many people will survive until this day?
I'm happy to take it. So the day after is yesterday. And it's always been here, really. And it will always be here because these tools and instruments are things that are really important for the survival, for the rethinking, and for the redesign of your world. Today and forever. So these are the most practical tools that exist for future-proofing your life and business. How many people exist or survive? I don't know. So.
Okay, so the day after is yesterday, and we need to do something today, and probably start with those questions Eyal recommended, and don't forget about push-ups and keeping your physical health. So the next question is from Oksana: how to stay calm in a current turbulent environment when the world is crashing down and people around are getting anxious. So we have those anxious people around. How to stay calm? Is it about the pills? Is it about some routines?
I can take this one. So anxiety is about the fear, and it's totally okay to be afraid about the future when the future is uncertain. But in the fear, please ask one question, because the fear, it's about the future, it's about the danger. And ask this question: is the danger, the things you're afraid of, are they real? And what if they are just in your imagination? And what you can do to avoid that situation? And who will be your allies? Who are the people you can work with, that you can support you? Because the fear and anxiety, it's an emotion, and the emotion is about the need. And the need that we have all when we are afraid is just to be covered by the other people. Like you're going in the war, you're going against the lion, you need to feel protected by the other people. So this is why it is that important to keep the social link right now, and to feel protected, and also to care about the other people. And I believe that also in the organization, I've seen that there is a message like this in the chat. One of the functions of the leader is to provide the proper protection to the people, not overprotecting them because we are all adult and responsible, but to provide this quality of the relationship in which people can talk about problems and solve them together. I think it's really very important. And I will add what Philippe told in the beginning, also take care of your physical health and do things for you. If you have time, start, for example, something that you never did, but you always wanted. I will give my own example. Now I'm taking the courses of the singing, because I'm singing really bad. So I decided that I will take time now for learning something new.
No, I heard you singing. You sing pretty well. So the next question is, I think it's for Philippe. So Philippe, business models seem to change as the virus will stay with us forever, or pandemics or other diseases may repeat. So what is the vector for this change? I think Victoria tapped it a little bit, so maybe you have another opinion. So what is the vector of this change?
Vector of the change of the business models, that's the question?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. The business models are changing. So what is the vector?
Well, the vector of the change is certainly, I would say, and among others, the remarkable unpredictability of what you will end up selling. And what I mean by selling, I don't just mean goods. I could mean services. It could mean charity benefits. It could mean art. It could mean a lot of things. As I was listening to you, all my friends, there is about business models, two examples that came to mind. One that you are all familiar with, which is this whole textile industry, even remotely linked to textile, which suddenly change what the workshops or factories are doing to start cutting fabric and sewing it to make masks. So that's a very formidable example of obviously business models that have been altered to fit a suddenly burst of demand that was totally unexpected. But I have another example in mind, which I think is quite eloquent and also goes back to the previous questions about plans. Should they be short-term or mid-term? I think business plans as well as business models have to have a dose of flexibility like never before. In other words, unpredictability doesn't mean you should not plan. Unpredictability means that your plan has to be a bit more, as I said, flexible. When the outburst of COVID happened in France, the most, let's say, the difficult part of France, which has been the most touched, where hospitals have been swamped, is the eastern part of France, okay? And especially Alsace, Lorraine, and some of those provinces. Whereas the western side of France, Brittany, Normandy, but mostly Brittany, has been relatively safe, and they have a lot of clinics and hospitals which had still capacity to offer. So the French government has sent trains, medicalized trains, the famous TGV, which is fast trains, from the east part of France to the west part to transport people who had the disease and make them be hosted by the hospitals in Brittany. But what was remarkable, that happened in a matter of days. How come can you have such an infrastructure put together in such a short amount of time, when you know what it takes to change a train from being just a mere passenger train to a train which has beds, which has all kinds of medical equipment? The reason why is there was a pre-existing plan, and there has been for a long time, which is a plan in case we have a viral attack on the French territory as part of the bacterial war. So this plan exists for a bacterial war and was taken and adjusted mutatis mutandis, meaning changing what has to be changed, not much, to face the COVID-19 outburst. And I think that example is particularly speaking because we're talking about a business model which is very heavy. I mean, we're talking about railways, we're talking about trains, we're talking about logistics, we're talking about things which are very material. And seeing still within that very rigid, capital intensive, manpower intensive plan, there has been this possibility to adjust it in a matter of days for a bigger purpose. And I think that tells us that it's not because you are in a big industry that you're locked within your current business model. You have to start to think how it can be adjusted where it matters. Don't know whether I answer your question, Ruslan, but
I think so. It answers for me. I don't know as for the person who has asked, but I hope so. So we have 3 more questions, and I suggest we answer them within 2 minutes because we are a little bit out of time. So the first one is about the leader. So the leader who supports the team, he shouldn't be frustrated, but he needs support as well. Where should the leader find such support? Is it about coaching? Is it about internal resources? What are the instruments for the leader to survive?
So I'm happy to address that. I have found that for myself, although I've been an executive coach for many years, the times where I made the greatest jumps in everything are the times when I work with a coach. But on this broadcast, we tried to also share some ideas of things that people can do by themselves right now, even if they can't work with a coach right now. So I would recommend working with a coach, joining a mastermind group, and surrounding yourself with a group of people that can help you shift and get the support that you need as a leader, as a top executive. But if you can't, create your own group. Find people in your immediate environment that can support you. And Victoria mentioned this also. So the notion of social ties and social connections is super important right now. We see this inside of buildings. So using neighbors for support. We see this definitely inside of families and communities, even if you can't go. But don't allow yourself to be alone. When you're alone, there's this downward spiral that happens. And if you remember the 2 brains that I showed before, the creative brain and the like always before brain, you'll see yourself on the left side for much longer if you don't get the support that you need.
Great. It actually answers the second question about how to see the world in colored, referring to that picture. So I think we have the last one. How networking, people communication, and work will change in the day after. Will it go digital or will it get back to what it was before? Let's try to predict it.
I can play with the prediction. I think that the crisis is very interesting in the sense it's showing that the people's connections are so important. And I think that we almost forgot about that. because in the organizations we think the organizations as structures composed from the boxes where there are people. And we've been working for 3 years with Gorna Khapetyan on the concept of the tandemocracy. And tandemocracy, we are saying that the minimum unit in any organization is the two people related to each other. So this relationship is as much important as the people. So I believe that whatever the communication will be, and I think that we will value much more both of them, is the digital, is the personal connections. But we will definitely need to put more energy in the quality of the bonding, on the quality of the relationship we are creating with the other people, with the significant others, with the families, with parents, with kids, with people within our organizations, and also with the other leaders. Because this is, as it's answering the previous question as well, something that will help us in having the energy and giving the energy, giving and receiving. So that's still about the love.
So one more thing that I want to say about network and networking. If there's one recommendation that I could give right now, is use one of the values that we as Sensemakers adopted, and that is generosity. If nothing else, try to give generously everywhere you can today. It's a great investment in strengthening the connections with others, but also it makes you feel great. Because if you're able to give something to someone else, that means that you're of value. So it works both ways, and giving generously right now has a huge impact.
Okay. Yes, Philippe, you would like to comment?
Just one word on this one as well, because that's dear to everybody's heart, obviously. I think like every time you're deprived from something, you start to realize the price of it. And we've been deprived from the ability to hug those we love outside the close family circle. We're deprived from having this physical interaction. And I think when we get back to that situation, it will take time, it will be slow, it will be limited. And I think we have the fantastic chance to realize that it's not a given, it's an incredible gift, a precious thing to be able to interact physically with those you like and have a sip of wine and hug each other and talk and laugh and pat ourselves in the back. And I find virtuous to some extent that suddenly we realize how a rare privilege this is.
Thank you very much. Actually, thank you for giving us and for sharing. I felt it like my personal mastermind. And as Eyal said, we are some average of people surrounded. So I personally believe that I became a little wiser today because it was really relevant and really valuable for me. So I hope it was as valuable for every single person in our audience. And thank you very much for your questions and your interactions. Don't forget about your physical health, ask proper questions every morning, and look for support and be the support, be generous, and surround with the proper people, and probably that's the way we survive in the boat, in the sea, and whatever other metaphor we can imagine. So thank you very much, Victoria, Philippe, Eyal. Thank you very much, everybody listening and watching us, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.